Joe, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, good. Thanks, George. I'm very pleased to be here. So thank you for the invite.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. And so you've before we kick into things, you've created a brilliant video called "What's the Problem," which does what it says on the tin. It outlines what the problem is that Bitcoin fixes, and you walked me through this. It must have been, what was it, 2 weeks ago now?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, you walked me through this, and I was like, right, you're coming on the podcast. I want everyone to hear about this and watch it and scream and shout about it. So we will get into all of this
Okay.
later on in the podcast. But before we get into all of it, I want to know more about you, aside from Bitcoin. So can you take me back? How have you got to where you are today?
Okay.
Big question.
Yeah, that's a very open question. Um, I'll probably end up in a monologue here, George. So please just
Go
jump in
for it.
and hurry me along if I'm going into too much detail. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is my first podcast. First podcast ever. I mean, but also in the Bitcoin space. I am now entirely focused on Bitcoin. There is nothing more important outside of family that I can be focused on. So that's where I am now, and we can maybe talk a little bit about that as well outside the video. But where I came from, as you probably tell from my accent, I'm a northerner in the UK. I grew up all over the north, but lived in Hull from about the age of 12. I always wanted to be a bookie. I used to work in the bookmakers. I used to have a lot of jobs. I worked in cinema, worked in the P factory, working nights at Asda, the standard stuff growing up, just to try and manage. I used to work in the bookies in William Hill, actually, all over Hull, which was a brilliant experience. But I loved I love sports. First of all, I love maths. I love the maths in this, and the winning and the losing. Not because I don't enjoy betting. I've never enjoyed betting. It's the underlying challenge in it. But yeah, so I've always been very mathematically minded. I toyed with going. There was one course in the UK at the time. It may not even exist anymore, but it was called Gambling Studies at Salford University.
No way.
Only country that involved gambling. So I was toying with going for that, and I got talked out of it. Rightly so in retrospect, because I ended up applying to Oxford to do physics and got in. And so turning that down to go to Salford Uni to do gambling studies is probably not gonna. It wouldn't have been a wise one to. But yeah, I spent 3 years studying physics there. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So this is going into far too much detail, Jordan. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like when you're 18, 19, it's like, who knows? But like a small number of people really know what they want to do. I want to be a doctor or a vet or something like that. But most people are just sort of living life, waiting for the penny to drop, I guess.
Yeah, that was me. Just to chip in there. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Coming out of school, I was an average student, and I liked sport and I liked business. So I found a degree that was sports business.
That's how it works, isn't it? It's to find something that you're going to enjoy doing for several years, and then back yourself to navigate from there to something there where you can actually support yourself afterwards.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin podcasting wasn't.
Unfortunately, there wasn't a course or a degree for Bitcoin podcasting.
Um, I mean, I guess at some point in the future it may already exist that there is Bitcoin related. I mean, there absolutely should be.
I think there will be, and I'm sure someone listening in will correct us if there is already one. But there's lots of people doing like dissertations. Like a few people have reached out to me. They're doing dissertations in Scotland around Bitcoin, and some people doing PhDs as well around Bitcoin. Because I know like Cornell University are very pro Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And in the UK, I'm unsure. I know Cambridge do a lot of work around the environmental impact of Bitcoin. But yeah, you're right. It will become more common, I think.
Hopefully that assessment is now a positive assessment as opposed to a falsely negative one or an uninformed negative one. But that's probably a separate discussion. Yeah. So when I got to yes, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but in my third year, we had to take we had a choice of some optional things, courses, and one of them was called financial physics, and it was the I didn't know at the time, and it would be fairly common knowledge in a very narrow sector of individuals, but option theory. So, people are talking a lot about options these days, and Michael Saylor around make sure his stock is super volatile, so you can monetize this premium in bringing more Bitcoin onto the balance sheet. But the underlying maths around pricing up of options, so the right but not the obligation to do something in the future, is rooted in Brownian motion, which is how molecules move around, which is obviously physics.
Yeah.
And so this course was going from the core of Brownian motion through to deriving and proving options, the underlying work around options theory. And I was like, this is amazing. This is amazing, because you end up like, okay, there's real world applications of the stuff that I'm learning about, and this is super cool. And so that was at the end. So it was the end of my second year, so I was too late to apply for internships and things like this at banks. But I spent the summer in the P factory in Hull, making giant cardboard boxes on a conveyor belt, and I would hammer it out for like 20 minutes, stack all these cardboard boxes on the conveyor belt, and then sit down for the rest of the hour, like with an options book, and be like learning everything I could about options and waiting for the conveyor belt to be empty again, and then I'd rush out, or restack it and do the same thing. And so I spent the summer just learning about options inside out, and I was like, this is what I want to do. And so then I applied to Goldman, was accepted, so I joined them straight out of uni, and then I spent 10 years, pretty much 10 years as an equity derivatives trader, mainly at Goldman, but also a couple of others in the last few years, and that was just amazing. So I was actually taking these mathematical models and doing real world pricing and trading with pension funds or hedge funds or family offices, these sorts of things. So I did that for a large number of years, probably too many in the end, and that was through the financial crisis in 2008 as well, which was just an unbelievable learning experience. Enough for 2 careers or 3 careers, I would say, probably, with the amount of stress and.
What was it like during 2008 and like the crash, or 2007, 2008 in the UK? Were you at Goldman during that time?
Yeah.
What was it like?
It was surreal. Like, there were some days, especially in 1 or 2 week period, where it was really unclear whether the bank would survive till the end of the day.
The end of the day.
End of the day, because banks were dropping left, right, and center. You go, and I remember being on the desk one day, and then Morgan Stanley's price just dropped in a straight line, like 20 or 30%. and everyone was just like, okay, Morgan Stanley are gone. It was like that. Everyone was just waiting to see who the next bank was to fail. I mean, obviously Morgan Stanley then didn't fail, but it was, it was really, really precarious because, at the time of, you know, family, young children, mortgage, it's in those early years, your sort of mid-20s. So it was incredible learning experience. And one of the, I guess, less fortunate things about doing the role I was doing, which is, trading options is, as Sailors says, the more volatile it is, the more valuable it is. And so, it was also a time of high panic amongst just everybody. And so, when you're trading, you're making money for the bank, you tend to be negatively correlated with stability. When things are really going wrong, you're making the largest amount of money for the bank. And so that helps the bank.
Yeah, that you're seeing such a strange situation of like, you're seeing banks falling everywhere, but you're obviously, are you betting, or let's say betting, your option trading around this? So you must have had like a good feeling, and a bad feeling at the same time.
Well, it was like the guillotine hanging over everybody. And so you had to sort of just carry on like normal because it was really important that everybody performs to the best of their ability to give the bank the best chance of surviving. But there's always, somebody somewhere in the bank has done some securitized mortgage obligation that they haven't found yet or something like that, because this is what was, causing issues. It wasn't servicing pension funds or, asset managers, who were managing people's money. It was, collateralizing and fractionalizing all the leverage and debt associated with the fixed income side of the business, tied to the housing market and loan securitization stuff, which was causing the issues. Which you never know about because you never see, these banks are so big. It's like it's a totally unknown part of the business. Yeah, but a great environment to be the first proper job, because it's like you're drilled. It's like everybody has to be firing on all cylinders all the time. Like it's a very draining environment, but like you sharpen your core skills, which is, so I'm very grateful for having started there, because it's given me a great foundation for, building on that through time and the various other things that I've done.
Yeah. And then so after your time at Goldman, what did you do after that?
I went to Morgan Stanley. Hi. And then I spent also a couple of years at UBS. It's like playing within the investment bank. It's like playing in a football team. I was basically playing right back in equity derivatives. Everyone's got a similar football team. You just go and play the same position somewhere else. It's like you just do that. But at the end of that, I was very bored really of what I was doing, but also all the excitement had gone out of the market. Because after 2000, early 2009, it was just a slow decline for the next 5-6 years in terms of level of activity, volatility in the market. There was just more and more money printing, as we come back to this. And, also a massive reduction in banks' willingness to do things because they were in increasingly defensive mode. And so I probably stayed longer than I should have done, but I was more sort of family driven. Because like young kids, mortgage and things, you want to reach that point of stability. Yeah. But over that period of time, I started initially for a bit of fun, just modeling football. So soccer for the Americans.
What do you mean by modeling?
It was when my wife was pregnant with our second child. She got to bed at like 7:00 in the evening because she was so tired. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I just sort of started thinking, I wonder what the maths are behind football. I wonder what the maths is. And then tried to build tried to model results in football matches, like what must the underlying maths be, and then building that out, and then it's entirely as fun. Like, it wouldn't be everyone's idea of fun, but I'm not full central to, my working in the William Hill shop. And then I just built it up and built it up, and then started finding online data whereabout where I could then compare the things that the predictions I was making about the relative probabilities of teams winning against any other team against the prices the bookmakers showed at the time, and then built up a level of confidence that actually I'm able to do this better than the bookmakers who are showing these prices to the average person's bet on. And I had then had the confidence to be able to leave the city to move into sports. And so within a couple of years of making that jump, I had sort of met someone who became my co-founder in the business that we subsequently set up. He had followed a very similar path, although we never met. He'd done 15 years at Morgan Stanley as a fixed income derivatives trader and structurer, so much closer to the epicenter of all the issues. But he similarly started modeling football, realized that he could do it better than the bookmakers, and then had left. But he was an engineer, and I was a sort of quant trader. And so when we met, it was, we spoke the same language, with like very similar backgrounds and approach to thinking about these things, but then entirely complementary skill sets. And so we founded our small quant engineering business. So we started writing models for football, but also actually cricket as well. We created automated trading systems, so real-time automated trading. And then we packaged those up and began supplying the bookmakers with these better prices and also unique customer products based on the mathematical insights, but also the real-time engineering to unlock new products for their customers. For example, like build a bet, where you bet on multiple things in the same game because they're not independent outcomes. Liverpool to win and Salah to score and Liverpool to have over 10 shots on target. Those three are not independent things. Because if Liverpool win, it's probably likely Salah has scored. And if Salah scored, they probably had more than 10 shots on target. So you have to take into account these correlations and things. So the work that we did was able to unlock new product for bookmakers to increase the offering for their customers from, increase the level of entertainment. And then, so within a couple of years, we were then acquired by our biggest customer, who at the time was a sort of national operator in Europe, in Eastern Europe, but predominantly retail. So think like William Hill or Romania, but with, a much smaller online presence because it was only in 2016 when online gambling was actually allowed in that country. So, you used to end up with a retail network before first, and then you put a website on top. And then there was some, very big technical challenges around, the amount of data, the amount of prices, the amount of bets that an online system needs versus a shop system where everyone has to write on a piece of paper and manually at the till. The frequency of everything is just like light years apart. But yeah, we were just super excited to join that business because the founder. We're going into so much detail here.
I love this.
The founder is just the most amazing guy. People can be ambitious, but quite often the level of ambition doesn't match the actions and isn't backed by consistency. So you need ambition, but you also need consistency of ambition and unrelenting actions towards executing it. And so, this guy had all of those things and continues to grow that business. And And so we were all in on helping them to execute, go from a sort of a national, just about number one player. Yeah. And over we spent last 5-6 years there. And now it's global business, with its own technology, top to bottom, and, ready to push on. And I think ultimately will become the biggest in the world. I've glossed over a lot of the last 5-6 years.
Yeah, no,
But during that period, we faced a lot of challenges in scaling that business because of the roots it come from, predominantly retail, and the business is growing very fast. And so how do you make it ready to be entirely scalable from a global perspective, where it's online first rather than retail, without slowing the business down or damaging it, things like this. And so there was a lot of challenge over this first 2 or 3 years because the company acquired us and 2 other startups. And then we spent a couple of years trying to figure out how to sew those things together while, helping to grow the underlying core business. And the business itself just grew massively in terms of capability, commercial prowess, I would say, by bringing in more and more experienced people from the gambling sector, but from countries that are effectively 10 years further on in terms of regulation and evolution from retail to online. And so, it's one of those examples where it's second mover advantage, that you get to see all the issues that people have had in the past and then navigate past them rather than just replicate them. But yeah, amazing company, amazing team.
So you mentioned that you're now full time in Bitcoin. So have you left the company now, and where are you?
I am still a long-term believer and shareholder in the business, but it's grown to an extent now that my ability to add value or it's severely watered down. But even if where we are as an overall business, and so I took the opportunity to leave earlier this year because obviously I found Bitcoin over the last period, and so since I'm classed at 2020, and it's very clear to me now that if I focus on anything else, it's a waste of my time.
You say you're 2020. What was your journey into Bitcoin, or how did you find it? Was it just slowing down because of the pandemic?
Well, my brother had mentioned. Well, everyone's got I heard about Bitcoin back in such and such.
Yeah.
But on the desk, it was actually UPS. A couple of the younger lads on the desk were doing some mining stuff. This was probably in 2012, something like that. So that was my first touch point with it. Obviously, did buy.
It's always the way.
I don't know whether I hope they held on to it and looked after it, but who knows? But then my brother, in sort of, I guess, 15, 16, was also talking to me about it. But again, I wasn't in the right space to sort of be receptive to it at that point. I think if anyone other than my brother had been telling me about it, I probably would have been more receptive at that point. Yeah, I think that's going to make David laugh. And then in 2020, we were in the pandemic, and at that time, I was listening a lot to Raoul Pal on Real Vision. I'm conscious, who's maybe ended up in a position now where it's sort of fairly different from where he was back then. But I felt like we were going through a similar sort of stepping through and realization about Bitcoin at the same time. So it was a really fantastic period for me because he was asking all the questions that I was thinking about, and it was perfect for me at the time. And you just build your conviction over time, and it is like a virus that sort of eats away at you. Once the penny drops and start connecting things, you know this, and many of your guests in the past have said like you just go down the rabbit hole and you will learn everything, and it just changes your perception about the whole world, about your life. And so yeah, it's been a very gradual thing since then, but really accelerated in the last couple of years, because it is just the most asymmetric opportunity ever. I mean, it's not just like a generational opportunity; it's a civilizational opportunity. Like, this is only going to happen once, and yeah, I just think there's like a big ego test around this as well, and that you see it. Like, I'm still on LinkedIn. I never really put much effort into LinkedIn in the past because I'm happy not. A lot of podcasts, but I'm happy being in the background as opposed to being, being center of attention. And so it's not my natural thing to be sort of ever posting anything on there. That may change in the near future circumstances, to try and grow awareness of something. But you see on there just the resistance, and a lot of it is uninformed, but some of it is almost like clinging to meaning in their own lives and jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a realization that you go through here that actually what I've been doing for the last 15, 20 years, like I'm looking at me in general, and so everybody is like, would I have made those same decisions if I'd found this early, if I had understood how this all works earlier? And then you end up in this, sometime,
I think that's what is that what you're trying to do with your video and your presentation? Is that try and bring that out in people in a better way or a different way that people are currently doing it?
That's a really good question. I hadn't really thought about it in that way. But I guess it does go some way to helping that as well. But I think with that sort of thing, there's a intrinsic resistance as well. Like, even if you showed them this is how it is and help them realize, like, actually, and it's like that great article by Croesus, like why the European League don't get Bitcoin. If you haven't read that article, read that article.
I just recognize it when you say it.
I'll send it to you after, and then maybe
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes
as well. Be that, yeah, that's brilliant. Reading that article, I'm saying this is exactly right. This is exactly right. But yeah, I guess the video would do a job for those people as well. And maybe if I see some of these comments on LinkedIn, I might post a video link and say, look, just give me 10 minutes and just watch this and see if it helps at all. But no, the video is something slightly different. I didn't intend to make it, which sounds stupid, I know, but I was invited by a friend who's also an entrepreneur to a weekend away, and he sort of, after 20 years, just like, I want to get all my friends who have entrepreneurial backgrounds in various types together, and let's just go somewhere for a weekend. We'll just hang out, we'll do a bunch of stuff, and it'll be fun. But he said, like, can everybody bring something to talk about? It's like half-hour presentation, if you will, and it doesn't have to be like slides. It could be anything. It should be like a conversation or anything. But obviously, I want to talk about Bitcoin.
Was that your first thing? Did you have any other? Was it, were you contemplating anything else, or was it just, we're going Bitcoin, I'm going to educate?
My first thought was, oh no, I'm going to have to stand up in front of 15 people I don't know and talk to them. But like my first thought. Yeah, I mean, maybe I could have spent some time trying to pick out some lessons or something for some maths related stuff, or like inference or something, like the power of inference, not influence, or something like that. But I fairly quickly dismissed it in favor of just talking about the thing that I like to talk about the most, you know.
Good move.
But I didn't know who. I never met any of these people, and I didn't know whether they knew anything about Bitcoin, or if they did, how much they knew. And so, and you'll have found this yourself, Jordan, because in preparing for podcasts and putting on the conferences and things like this, like you end up getting sort of almost forced into articulating your understanding of something, because you need to then go and hang some content on it, like and then put it out to your guests and things. Whereas for most of us who are on the other side of the podcasting interaction, where we're listeners, like long time listener, first time caller type feedback, is that you're never really forced to put anything down in writing. It's like you carry in your head like your understanding of Bitcoin and all the wonderful things it solves for the world. And then you try and convey that to people in your life, and you try and orange pill people, but it tends to, for most people, be a fairly unstructured thing, just finding the right way to try and explain it to someone. But you've never actually had to sit down and write an article on it, or write a book or something like that. So that's quite hard experience. And so just preparing for this weekend away, I was like, oh right, I have to actually create something. And it's like, and so you end up in this sort of fairly self-reflective things like, okay, well, how would I explain this to someone? And then it's not just the content, it's how can I deliver something in a way that is actually going to land with the person watching it, especially if I don't know who they are. And so I ended up sort of turning it around. And so I created a presentation about Bitcoin that doesn't mention Bitcoin until the very last slide. And it was called "What's the Problem?" Because I feel, and also from my own experience, you often fail just trying to talk to people about Bitcoin, because either they're not receptive or they have like no mental framework whatsoever to understand what the hell you're talking about or why it's even relevant for them. And I've since sort of come to the conclusion, I guess, that like making the leap to Bitcoin is still quite big for people. It used to be absolutely huge. It used to have people having to go straight to the white paper, right? And so the number of people who could make that leap was incredibly small, right? Incredibly small. And then you've gone from the white paper to like more accessible material around it, and then more accessible material around it, more accessible material. But a lot of them are anchored in, either the cryptographic aspects of it, that's where it started, but then increasingly the monetary aspects of it, the financial. And this is why you have the wonderful creations of Safe Bean and sort of really kickstarting the Bitcoin Standard, and then have Lynn Alden's amazing stuff, Broken Money. These things are amazing resources, and every time somebody's building something, like we're moving closer and closer to where it's accessible for the most number of people. And so like we get this acceleration of people making the leap. But I still feel like there is too much of a gap from everybody to the Bitcoin Standard.
Yeah.
For example, because you have to have a motivation or a reason to read it. Like it's a great book, but I imagine the drop off is a lot of people wouldn't even open the cover. Right. And then it takes motivation to get through it, to get to the realization moment, because you've got to go through the history of money and then how all these things work. And it's, and it's like, okay, well, how would I try and produce something for 50 people I don't know and help them understand why they should even care? And so my goal was, I'll talk to them for 30 minutes. All they know is the title, What's the Problem? I think they know it's a Bitcoin presentation. And it's like, my goal is at the end of these 30 minutes, they all want to learn about Bitcoin. Not that they don't know anything about Bitcoin. I'm not going to educate them about Bitcoin explicitly, but I'm going to give them a mental framework on which to understand why they need to. Right? And that was the aim. And so, yeah, but it went really well. It went really well. And it's the only presentation during I've ever given where I was actively excited about doing it. Normally you're like dreading giving a presentation or standing up in front of people. But yeah, I loved giving it since. And I was very kindly invited to the Bristol mini Bitcoin conference by Finn and the guys. They took a bit of a flyer on me. Just messaged them on X and said, I've built something, I'd love to share it. And they kind of invited me down. That was the first time in front of Bitcoiners, probably 80 odd there, I would think, and that went really well. And so, yeah, I would just love everybody to see it. My real hope here is that this is the thing that you send to people before you send the Bitcoin Standard. And it's like, no pressure. It's like, I saw this. I think you'd enjoy it. It's really interesting. Just watch it. Right? Because they don't even know necessarily it's about Bitcoin until the last slide. And by that point, they're like, okay, right, I now realized why I need to read a book about Bitcoin. Or please, can you now tell me more about this? I just feel like we'll end up having a lot more success in orange pilling people if we can link it to what's happening in their own lives. And I guess I haven't really explained what the content is or what the structure is, but it's in the form of a story rather than, this is the history of money, or this is how banking works, or, aren't governments evil? There's validity in all of those approaches, but to try and make the top of the funnel as big as possible for bringing people into that first touch point with Bitcoin. I sort of decided that I should just try and link it back very explicitly to the problems they have in their own lives. Because, we all, like we say, Bitcoin fixes this, and it does. It fixes pretty much everything because everything's rotten from the core. And if you fix the core, then, you're still going to have some problems, but you have far fewer problems than you do today. But the idea is, it's a story, but it starts by identifying the issues in people's lives. So whether it's, homelessness or cost of living or the forever wars or the health crisis or obesity or, breakdown of nuclear family, all of these things, making the viewer realize that actually, some of these are affecting me to a greater or lesser extent, and then basically saying to them, they all share a cause, and it's the quality of the money, and then taking them through a story which then shows them exactly how that plays out through a shipwreck in two sides of an island, and one half of the island is using perfect money, and the other half, they also use perfect money, but they have a big red button, and they can press the button to change the aspects of the money, and then how that quickly escalates once they start corrupting the money into, it causes this, and that causes this, and that causes that, and then you end up getting back to a huge penny drop moment where people can see very clearly and have gone through the thought process themselves through the video, through the presentation. Actually, there is a sequence of events here, and these issues I see around me today, they are because of the money printer. They are because of the big red button. They may be 2 or 3 steps removed, but now I can have a mental model where I can tie all of these things back to a central cause. Okay. And now once I do that, now I'm much more receptive to people telling me how to solve that problem with the big red button, the fact that governments even have this big red button, but to do it through a story. And it's quite dark content, as you can imagine, because like showing all these negative consequences and things just escalate and escalate and escalate. But it's wrapped in a very soft, friendly Pixar style
I was about to say
graphics, which make it um, which take the edge off it, I think.
yeah, it's like when I watched it, I wouldn't say, well, it's not dark when you're watching it because you tell it in such an amazing way, and like with the Pixar animation, like you still remember each character very well. But it is like the content of the problem is dark, as we know. Like the problem that we've got in society at the moment with our money and how it's all structured. And I think that's why I loved it so much. Of one, you've got the story where everyone that knows me, that ever watched one of my presentations, I tell a story because it just captivates people so much more than going in and saying, this is the problem. This is how money works. What is money? Like, oh, God, like, it's so boring. Like, but exciting at the same time.
The average person, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we like it.
Yeah.
But if I was to say to my friends who are maybe not in or as nerdy, what is money, and try and explain to them, yeah, they would tell me where to go. Uh, so the way that you do it and then link it all back to the money, like, because that's what we're trying to figure out, right? Is these problems that we have in society today, there is a root cause, but nobody can see it because it's all intertwined.
Yeah.
And just by laying it out, I think that's where people get that aha moment, or will get that aha moment from this video.
Yeah, I agree. And I also try to give people a foundation for free market economics as well through that. And there is one slide in the presentation, which is I'd probably describe as the price of tomorrow in a single slide. Get boozer on the puppet, where it helps, by going through it and having it as part of the story, everyone can understand how trade is meant to work, and that price is falling and quality of life rising is the natural state of the world, which is the polar, just the reverse of what we have today. It's like prices go up and quality of life declines as a result of food. And so, but that's where it shouldn't be. That's the unnatural state. But it's like, a fish being in a bowl of water. It doesn't realize what water is because it's never been outside. So we've grown up our entire lives in this fiat system. But when you strip it back and you think about it from first principles, this is absolutely not where you end up. And so it's like Principles of Economics by Safe Bean and Prices Tomorrow by Jeff Booth, all on these couple of slides. And sort of by layering in those sort of hard money Austrian foundations as well, it also helps people re-anchor as a sort of comparison as to where things should be.
Bringing all of this in to like, how long is the presentation?
It's about 35 minutes.
Yeah, into 35 minutes. How long did it? Because I totally get you when you were saying you consume all of this information about Bitcoin and you have it in your head, but then articulating it is a totally different story. Is not being a bumbling mess of, I don't know where, I know it all, but I don't know what order to put it in when it comes out of my mouth and how it'll resonate. So how long did it take you to actually form the flow of the presentation?
It really was an iterative process, and very grateful to the friends who I ran early versions by or asked for input. So I don't know, 3 weeks maybe to get like the overall structure, but then since giving the presentation, I've also continued to improve it and refine it. And so I'd hate to see the number of edits made. But yeah, it's also helpful with feedback as well, because every time you give it to someone, they ask a different question. You're like, okay, well, maybe I should have phrased that slightly differently, or I should have included that in the slide, or I'll take that out because it's confusing or ambiguous. And that's the sort of thing that you only get over time. And
Yeah.
but once I've done the video, well, the video is filmed. Once the video is released, then I don't get to edit it anymore. So
It's out there.
it's out there, and I apologize in advance for it maybe not being as polished uh, as it would be if it was a professional doing it. But I hope it's good enough.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. But take me back to the first time you presented it, because we skipped over a little bit of you presented it to the 15 people. How did it land with them?
It was amazing. It was amazing. I was so happy. I'm so happy with how it went because they didn't know what it was about. And I'd asked my friend, because obviously he's one of the people who had helped me sort of iterate the presentation, because I only created it for his event. And so he'd seen it, but I said, like, please don't tell people what it's about. But as I was going through it, I started seeing some people at the 15 start nodding and be like, smiling, because they could see where this was going. And this is before I knew which one of them were Bitcoiners and etc. But yeah, like, so many interesting questions for people. A lot around, why Bitcoin, why not Ethereum? Doesn't it kill the planet? These types of questions. But interestingly, there was one of the guys who was Lebanese, and his, Lebanon has been through a terrible period, as we all know. But he, watching it, sort of ad-lib his quote. It was like, "Oh my god, this is exactly what happened." But helping, and so helping to join the dots back to what actually caused the problem, and then to have it validated by someone who was like, "Yes, this is exactly what happened." And I now fully realize it's because of this. And he's now deep down. I hope he gets. I'll send him this podcast. But he's deep down the rabbit hole now. He's reading books that I haven't read on Bitcoin and stuff. So I would say overall it was the most effective 30 minutes of orange pilling I've ever been able to do. And it also gives me the confidence that this is actually going to be a really good tool for people.
Yeah.
Because it narrows that remaining gap we have to the everyday person.
Yeah, you're right. Because we have that gap still. And I talk about a lot of, I would never send someone the Bitcoin standard to start with. Because they just wouldn't be interested. They don't understand, or they're not interested in Bitcoin at all. So they need something that's fairly short to tell them why they should be interested in Bitcoin. My last question to you is, so what's the problem? When this podcast goes out, we'll be live. The video will be out there. And if someone watches it and only takes away one thing, what do you hope it is?
That if we fix the money, we'll fix the world. Because if they leave with that, then the snowball has already started rolling for that, and we all know where that ends up.
Yeah, we've all been through that process. Just how do you spark that process happening, right? That's how I see the video, is that spark to send someone down the rabbit hole. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm very conscious I've done so much talking. I've talked more in this conversation than I think in any other conversation recently. I hope the balance has been okay for a podcast.
100%. Like, your story is just amazing, how you've got to where you are, and then making this video, why you made the presentation, I think is the important thing as well. And how long you actually put into the process of it. Just so I've got it on audio as well. If someone wants to watch the video, where are they going?
Yeah, so The presentation is called What's the Problem? But that is going to live at satsversusfiat.com. So Sats, SATS, versus VS, and then Fiat, FIAT.com. Also on X with the same handle, Sats versus Fiat. People can also message me on X if they want to get in touch. My handle is Satmojo, JOE. And I'm also on LinkedIn for any old world who is still on there as well. But yeah, I'd love to hear from people. I would also just really encourage people to watch it and then just share it with people they care about.
Yeah.
And don't even tell them it's Bitcoin if you don't have to. And I would say one last thing, Jordan. This isn't a commercial enterprise for me. It's just like a charitable one. And so got the video made, create the website and stuff. This is, I consider like proof of work, contribution to the community, to the Bitcoin community. So I just really hope people get behind it and share it. And if you're interested to help, in an ideal world, on the website, there is a option for people who have seen it to arrange other talks and things like that. So for example, if someone would want this presentation done in a school or a university or, an industry event, perhaps not even a Bitcoin industry event, to go give this presentation to normal people outside of a Bitcoin environment would be amazing. But I can't do all that. It's not my ambition to do all that, but there are plenty of people within Bitcoin who are educators, who love talking especially about Bitcoin. And so if you're interested to put your name forward and help out, if we do end up having anybody that wants to have the presentation, then please just get in touch as well, because I'd love for this to turn into a broader community effort.